to Beyond the Barrier, the podcast where we explore the wild world of public safety, fire, law enforcement, EMS, and security with your hosts, Jake, Corwin, and Joe. We're here to break down the barriers and go beyond the usual topics, from heroic tales of first responders to the latest tech in the security industry. We've got you covered, so buckle up and get ready for a ride that's sure to be as exciting as a high-speed chase, but with less sirens. Let's jump beyond the barrier and see what's on the other side.
All right, and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Barrier. Today we have a special guest with us, host of Darknet Diaries, Jack Rhysider. I said that correct, right, Jack?
Yeah, Jack Rhysider, you got it.
A couple of housekeeping things. If you'd like to talk to us or have episode ideas, reach out to us at beyondthebarrier1@gmail.com. You can also find us on all of our social media, Facebook, the website formerly known as Twitter. Still working on the website. That will be coming in the near future. And if you have artwork, go ahead and send that out to us, and we will get that curated on our socials and all that kind of fun stuff. Like we said, today we have Jack Rhysider with us, host of Darknet Diaries. Jack, you spent a lot of time in the cybersecurity space. I know we recently did a show on cybersecurity and securing the Nexus, that kind of collusion of cybersecurity and physical security. What experience do you have in the cybersecurity realm? I know, obviously, you host one of the most thrilling tellings of cybersecurity stories out there, covering things like Revil, spam botnets, and everything from bad actors using phone calls to hacking anything and everything. So what's your experience?
Yeah, I mean, so I got a degree in computer engineering, and then from there I was able to go into cybersecurity, network security engineering, right? So I was securing the perimeter, making sure there's no bad actors coming into the network, and then watching the logs to see if anything did show up. And I spent 10 years doing that, but then, now I work on the podcast Darknet Diaries, which is kind of like a true crime meets cybercrime sort of show. And this is where I get really deep into stories. Often I feel like I'm a slow news junkie where I'll wait 5 or 10 years for a story to finally have all the details revealed. And then I'll be like, yeah, now it's ripe to tell because now we know all the answers to our questions. And so that's when I start getting into some episodes. And yeah, I'll get real deep into it, and I want to understand all the technical capabilities of what they use to, hack into things, or what was done once they did, and what are the options. And, it's real geeky in that sense, but I also keep it at a level that anyone can understand as well. Just in case you want to know more, it's there, but you don't necessarily need to follow it, into the weeds to still enjoy it. So yeah, that's kind of my experience.
Awesome. And it's an amazing show, really. Like you said, even someone with no experience can understand what's going on. So it's truly a good show, great show to listen to.
Thank you.
So how did you originally, what made you get into cybersecurity? What was your drive behind wanting to, what with cybersecurity?
Yeah, I had that degree in computer engineering, and I was just kind of a general technician, in the sense that I was learning a little bit about everything at this job that I had. But then they said, hey, we have an open position for a security engineer. And I was like, yeah, engineer sounds great. That's what I've always wanted to be. And so I jumped in, and that's when I realized that this is where I want to be, because with security, you kind of have to know a little bit about everything. And that's what school did to me. It taught me, one class on operating systems, one class on Pythons, one class on assembly language, one class on binary logic. It's just a little bit here and a little bit there. And, when am I ever going to come back to learn, to understand operating systems at that core fundamental level of what a boot up process looks like and all this sort of thing? Well, when I got into security, all these things came into effect. There were viruses that were in the master boot record suddenly. There were viruses that were on the network and in the TCP/IP network traffic. There was stuff that was in programming languages that I had this knowledge. And so to me, after school, I didn't quite know where I wanted to be or what I wanted to focus on. But then when I had that security engineer position, I was like, yes, this brings every bit of my knowledge together. It felt like I was on Jeopardy every day working there, because you get such obscure questions thrown at you that you have to really reach down into any and all resources that you had in your past to try to remember where you know this obscure piece of information from to help you like at least Google something, right? Sometimes you don't even know what to Google when you're just like sitting there like, where do I start with this problem? So yeah, that's where I felt like I've made it. Like this is where I need to be.
That's amazing. And my short stint in cybersecurity was, with a finance company, mostly doing the business aspect. I'm not an engineer. I don't pretend to know anything on the back end a whole lot, but exactly like you said, a lot of IT is Googling things and trying to figure out where did I remember this obscure knowledge and how can I basically Google dork my way into finding an answer.
Yeah, exactly.
And all the stories you have covered, what has been your favorite one that you talked about? And I'm sure it's hard to choose.
I think my listeners really love social engineering stories. This is where, a company hires a hacker to come hack into their company because it's like, we're secure. How do we test it though, right? So they hire someone, and then listeners just love this. These are fan favorites of, hey, how did you get in? What are all the techniques? And it's exciting. You're trying to evade cameras and security guards and detection and sneak into buildings. And then once you're in there, what can you get access to and get and then get out? And if you get caught, then how do you get out of being caught? It's not so much just getting caught, but sometimes you've got to like run away or lie your way out of it or something. But I feel like that is kind of like playing with Monopoly money, because as soon as you do get caught, you could just pull out a card and say, actually, I was hired to be here, la-di-da. And then say, oh, okay, haha, funny. And that's it. What I like, the stories that I think are really interesting are the ones that same stuff is happening, but it's not a simulation. It's the real deal. And so I had, an episode with a CIA agent. This one's called Mad Dog. And the CIA agent is doing all that stuff to infiltrate into, foreign secrets, trying to figure out a way to bribe the receptionist into giving up intelligence and, dignitaries of other countries and stuff. And how do you social engineer into them? And, he tells me things like, oh, you find the person who's going through a divorce because they're going through a very tough time mentally, that they just don't have their guards up to know when somebody might be lying to them or cheating them to get information from them and stuff like this. And to me, this is like, oh my God, number one, isn't this illegal? And he's like, yeah, that's illegal. You can't do, foreign spying. Espionage is illegal. And so it's like, oh my gosh, you're already like breaking the law to do this. And if you get caught, what could be the consequence? Well, you could go to prison for life. Like, wow, those are big stakes. That's the stuff that I'm excited about. And nobody asked me for more of those episodes. So to me, that's kind of like my secret little enjoyment is when I get to do that stuff, because it feels like it's for me and not really for the audience. They want the Monopoly money kind of stories instead. I kind of joke about this, but I feel like that's how it goes.
I completely get that. That's funny. Honestly, my personal favorite would be it's rather more recent, Deviant. That was just a great episode, and the stories that he had.
Kind of going back on that last track, so you're looking at, and you enjoyed those Mission Impossible type stories, Jack, and kind of what goes on in the background for when there is no safety net, right?
Yeah, that's exciting, isn't it? To not know where to turn when you really get in trouble. And it's fun to me. I kind of like Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean in a lot of ways, where he jumps without knowing what that safety net is too. And he doesn't have a plan that's going to be 1 minute or 2 minutes from now. He just knows what his best move is now. And he figures it out somehow. He somehow gets through it. And I love those kind of experiences where we don't know what our plan is. We don't have a plan, but we're going to be thinking on our toes and we're going to get out of it.
And those are pretty exciting. There's even stories out there where that safety net fails. I think within the last 5-ish years within the state of Iowa, they had a pen test for a courthouse, and they ended up getting arrested by the county sheriff's department. And they're like, hey, we have this, basically that get out of jail free card, and it didn't work. They still went to jail and still ended up having to go through the court process for it because, if I recall correctly, they didn't have, or the county IT director didn't have authorization to do the pen test on the courthouse, and it caused a whole mess.
Mm-hmm. I did this story at this episode called The Courthouse.
So, Jack, a lot of my experience is in the medical field. I've been an EMS provider for a couple of years now, quite a few years now. And biggest question I have for you is you see in these movies, of course, everybody knows that, you can't take everything you see in a movie as reality. But, or even on the news, you see it too, hospitals being held hostage. They've been hacked into and their patient documentation or whatever is being held hostage. But the biggest question I have is why, or I guess, how am I going to say this? What is the easiest way hackers, or why are hospitals such a huge target for hackers?
I don't think they're a huge target. I think it's still, in a lot of circles, it's kind of a forbidden target where it just seems ridiculous that somebody would have the audacity to do that. And it's still a shock, right? It hasn't gone to the point where it's like, oh yeah, that's normal. And I think it's still a shock to us. And so I think why it's a target is maybe a couple of reasons. Number one, maybe the people who are doing, maybe ransomware on it or whatever, don't even know it's a hospital. They're just like, hitting whatever they can hit on the internet, or not really caring the name of the company. Just, can we ransomware this company? Okay, good. We got in. We don't even look to see who they are. There might be that, but it also might be like, oh, wow, this is critical infrastructure that they're going to need to get back online. So this is a great target to have. And it just, I can't understand somebody having zero morals to just want to make money off a hospital where you could potentially kill someone. Like, it's just ridiculous. But yeah, there's that. But then I think when it comes to certain industries, they may not have the resources to put all the focus on to security, right? So government, schools, hospitals don't always do that. They put their resources somewhere else. They have a higher focus on something else. And so it's not necessarily that they don't want to focus on it, but they just can't. They've got other bills to pay. They've got other things that are more important, and they just don't have the funds to make security a priority. So that sometimes happens. And, when that happens, things start breaking down. A lot of times this stuff is segmented in a way that, critical life required systems are kind of on a separate network or in inner wall than what's on the outside. And so it can't quite reach into, the heart monitoring system in a hotel or hospital bedroom or something, right? So there's some good like air gapped stuff there that does keep it from getting too problematic.
Right. Okay. So I think that's a pretty good answer, actually. So my other question is, with, I guess, the technology evolving, like, for instance, have you ever seen or heard of like specific pieces of equipment being hacked into or anything like that?
Regarding a hospital?
Just anywhere, I guess. Not specifically a hospital.
Yeah, I mean, it is surprising a lot of times to see what is on the internet that maybe shouldn't be. There's a website called Shodan that just kind of steps through the internet. It just says, hey, let's go through every IP address in the world and see if it's open and available. And it's not just like it's connected to the internet, but this stuff is just like right on the internet, like without anything in between. And so you see things like security cameras that are just wide open. You can log into them and see what's there at that person's house or from that building or inside a building or whatever. And it's crazy how many security cameras have the feed exposed. And they probably shouldn't be, right? A live feed of someone's inside house doesn't ever make sense to me to have that public available. So yeah, that's some stuff. I've seen license plate readers. So like these are things that are on the freeway that are like, as you drive by, it's like, oh, that car just drove by and that car just drove by. And so you can see all the license plates that are driving by this section that probably shouldn't be there. I mean, these are things that you don't even need a proper login. It's just kind of, you get to the website and suddenly you're like, oh, here's the cross streets of what's going on there. But it goes so much deeper, right? There's SCADA systems that seem to be online sometimes, which is like controlling, industrial systems like power plants, electrical facilities, pumps, dams. Sometimes this shows up. And it's not necessarily, here's the control valve for the dam, but it's like, here's the monitoring equipment so we can see all the stuff going on or something, right? And it's like, this should not be on the internet. This shouldn't be like wide open, exposed like this. And so, yeah, if you ever want to really just get a good answer to that question of what's out there that shouldn't be out there, Shodan is the website to just go to and click around and you'll find some crazy stuff.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. So I guess my last thing to follow up with, is there a common mistake that you see corporations or individual? Is there a common mistake you see that they all have, create, and that causes this type of issue with their companies or anything like that?
The thing I don't like, and I wish companies did this more, is they really, really get too much liability by collecting too much data. And so the more stuff you need to protect and secure, the more difficult it is to protect and secure. So I really wish companies would just reduce this, right? Let's not collect any customer data. Let's not store credit cards. Let's not store any of this stuff we don't need. And next time they want to shop, let's just have them ask for their credit card again. Like, why do we need to store it? There's no reason, we don't need to store their address and all this sort of thing. Just ship it and be done. Like, I don't know. So, but companies seem to be going in the opposite direction. They're like, no, let's get more. Let's ask them what their favorite color is and who their fiance is, whatever the case is. Like, you don't need all this information. And so the more information they have on the customers, the more difficult it is to secure it. But not only that, they've got their own, internal stuff that they're trying to secure, like, employee data or customer contact list. I don't know, but it's like, hey, like, for instance, I run this podcast, right? And I have a website that has 0 cookies on the website. And I do not know how many visitors or where they're from or any of this stuff. And I've got no data on my listeners, and I can run a company just fine. I have sponsors and advertisers, and we do just good. I don't need to collect a whole bunch of information as a media entertainment company, right? And so I wish more companies did this. They just stopped collecting tons and tons of data and storing it forever. And it just makes such a bigger liability for them, and it makes a bigger headache and a bigger mess for when things do go wrong, which they will go wrong. And if you had it just like, nope, everything's off our servers, there's no way you can get into our customer data because we don't have our customer data. That's a world I'd rather see.
And that's very insightful, especially since, like you said, companies are trying to gather and collect that data. And a lot of them just bundle it up to sell to other data brokers, essentially, causing a whole other rigmarole, and where we see data breaches. Just throw your information into the nether and call it good. How do you think individuals can protect themselves when the companies decide, we don't want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm big on digital privacy. I'm a big advocate on this. So I'm very cautious on who I'm giving my data to. Let me just give you an example here. There's a legal principle called the third-party doctrine. And the U.S. government says, well, listen, if you're already giving your GPS and heart rate monitor data to some company, then you don't have the reasonable right to privacy anymore, because we're going to be able to ask that company for that data, and that's totally fine. We can do. And it's like, no, at what line does that stop? Because what about my bank? Like my banking information, and the third party doctrine's like, oh no, you voluntarily gave your financial information to them. We can have that now. And this is an awful concept to have as a legal precedence, but this is what's been established out of a couple of Supreme Court rulings. And so it's just ridiculous that all that information that we thought is going to private places that should not ever be, sharing it or giving it away are actually sharing it and giving it away. Sometimes just posting it publicly for anyone to see, such as the case with Strava. They post heat maps of where runners are going every day. You can see someone's public profile on Strava and see where they've been running and what they've been up to. And sometimes it can lead right to their house. Like, oh yeah, this person keeps leaving this at this address every day and coming back every day. It must be where they live or something, right? And it's ridiculous just how much of this, and you don't think like, oh yeah, my GPS tracking watch is sharing this data publicly for anyone who wants it. But yeah, it does. Absolutely does. And so, yeah, my advice is just to be extremely cautious with where you're sending your data, who you're giving it to. And here's the biggest problem with that is I'm a huge technology lover. I've always been in love with computers and technology. And so it feels like I've been betrayed by my lover. It feels like it's an awful toxic relationship that I'm in when the stuff I love so much is hurting me so much and causing just madness in my life, because I don't like people having information about me that I didn't willingly share with them. So it's a very difficult thing to opt out of the latest technology and say, no, I'd rather have things that have like half as many features but are private. It's difficult. It's really difficult, and it's frustrating to me. And so I'd like to see people take it more seriously, because I think if we do, then companies will start recognizing that and, provide us the privacy we're demanding.
I'm kind of a prime example of this. I got a letter in the mail about a month ago. So I had a personal loan, and the personal loan was sold to another company. And I got a letter from the company that their server had been compromised, and that my financial data was compromised as well, and that the law enforcement was investigating basically, and that they were going to offer me 2 years of credit monitoring and all this stuff. And it's like, they failed me.
Mm-hmm.
And it just it absolutely blew my mind.
Yeah. And we felt like, and, up until now, it felt like banks and maybe even like, doctors are this sanctuary of our private data where nobody should ever be allowed to take a look at this. And that day is over. Your data is in breaches, and it's being stolen from medical institutions, financial institutions, or shared or given away freely or publicly or to data brokers. And so the vast amount of data that's on us out there is stuff that we gave to one of these companies because maybe we wanted their service or something like that. And we just have to really watch out. What I do is I use fake names and fake phone numbers and fake addresses and fake all this stuff to get things like Spotify. Like, I don't need to give Spotify all this information about me. I just want to listen to your stinking music. Why do you need my address? This makes no sense. And they need my address because they have, other people that might be listening from my address or something like that. And they want to try to correlate who are all the users of forget that. Just let me play your stinking music. You don't need my address. And so I get real huffy about places that just ask for way too much, because I'm like, you're not going to keep it. You're not going to store it properly. You're going to sell it. All this stuff is just, I don't want to be part of this whole thing.
It reminds me of your episode with the European phone company. I forget the name of the phone company, but they just kept losing customers' data over and over and over. They had a third-party vendor, and the vendor lost customers' data. It was just a crazy episode to listen to.
Yeah, that's the Talk one.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
So how safe is the everyday person on the internet when, they're online shopping and all that?
So it's a tough question, because there's like I was saying, these companies have betrayed you. And so they're taking your data and then selling it to other marketing firms or data brokers, or the government easily can get it. And, the idea here is there are places in the world that free speech isn't allowed. There are places where your normal behavior may be illegal in those countries. What happens if a regime comes into power here that makes what you do illegal? And now you have all this evidence of you buying these things or saying these things or doing all this stuff. And suddenly now they're coming after you. Like, it's a bit too late to worry about it then. So it's a difficult question. How safe are we? We're just giving so much data out there. And with a growing AI out there being able to identify who's saying what, or what they're, how they're correlated and who's connected to who and all this sort of thing. It's really going to be a new world that we're going to be stepping foot in. I mean, just think about Google, for instance, right? They could possibly, if you have a Google email, they could be reading through all your emails, identifying your location, knowing all your search history, which says a lot, right? Like all the things that all the sicknesses you might be experiencing, or the DIY projects you might be trying to do, or the things you're looking up reviews for online and buying. And it's just, you could build quite a picture of someone just based on their search results. And just Google has so much more stuff. They have, website analytic tools where they can correlate like what websites you've been going to, and they can see your YouTube, what you're watching on YouTube, and just so much more that they could build quite a profile on you. And if they're doing that, then they could build a profile on everyone, and then they can start, I don't know, what are they going to do with that data? Right? Is it going to be used for you or against you? Is it going to be, maybe it's at first it is for you, where it's like, hey, we just noticed that you're really lonely, and there's someone who lives 2 doors down that has very similar, profile as you. And they're also lonely. Why don't you go over there and meet them? Do you want me to start an email thread so you could say hi? Like, there's some weird stuff that's going to be happening in our future that may be good at first, but then also might be like super creepy and scary, because now we have zero privacy and there's absolutely nothing I can do or say that isn't going to be snooped on or something. I think that might be taking your question to an extreme. I think you might be just wondering, like, no, if I shop online, how exposed am I to scammers or thieves or something? And yeah, I mean, it's a big connected world. And so I've seen scammers use this to their advantage as well, right? They can get some of this data brokerage information and then pose as you to get access to sites that you only have access to, like for instance, your bank account or your cryptocurrency account. If they have enough information on you, they can then get into those accounts because they can just say, hey, I need a password reset. Okay, well, what's your dog's name? Oh, I know that. And so they can, go through these steps or whatever. Yeah, and there's other things that they can do. So yeah, it is a bit of a scary world. And I once again, I encourage you to take your digital privacy and security seriously, because these companies aren't quite always looking after your best interests, and the governments might not be either.
It's crazy to think that, all these companies gather all this data on you, and you're right. For what reason? And it's even crazier to me to think that, I don't remember the law that you said it was, that where you sign over your data, well, we can now look at it. What?
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. And there was a thing I saw in the news yesterday, which is that the CIA is rolling out a new AI tool to be able to go through all the available data out there to identify, I don't know, whoever they're after. And so if you think about just like this massive lake of data that is just everyone's information all over the internet, and to be able to use AI in such a way to pull out those needles in the haystack and say, okay, this is what we know about this person, and here's all the information we have on them, like just instantly and quickly. It's going to be quite a crazy experience. And so I'm hoping that the laws we have in place for a lot of this stuff are ancient. They're from like the 70s or 90s or something, where we didn't have this level of technology today. And so I'm hoping that there's like some oversight that starts happening, or something new that gets revised to the point where, no, we can't just do everything that we want at any time to, get. It seems like it's out of control, and I hope things get back in control.
I got a prime example for this that's kind of related to the medical field. I recently had a car accident that I responded to, the trauma. The individual was pretty bad off, pretty hurt, and I ended up life flighting him off the highway. Normal stuff after that. Time goes on. I did my report. Our report is done in a state database now instead of locally like it should be. But I didn't finalize the report, and then a couple weeks goes by, and then I get a message from the hospital basically, and they said, "Hey, we need you to finalize the report, as we need to see it." And I said, "Well, why do you need to see my report on this patient? Because it was prior to your care, and you've since terminated care with this patient, so it's not beneficial to you." And they said, "Well, the law actually requires you to do the report and send it to us within 48 hours because we share it with multiple different agencies to review to see, what educational value it has and things like that." And I thought, well, that's crazy. You're sharing this person's information and what tragedy they experienced without them even knowing. It just
I wasn't
blew my mind.
I'm not aware of how this works, but it does seem like there's too much sharing in that scenario. And I hope that the HIPAA rules come into play where, no, you have to have a specific reason why you need to see this patient's information. And those just don't necessarily sound like good enough reasons to me, but I can see how that's being abused. It probably could be.
I brought that up. I thought, hey, this is a HIPAA violation, you're only supposed to see a patient's personal information if you're part of their care. You're not a part of their care if you terminated care with them because they're no longer a patient with you. And they said, well, the law actually allows us to. The law says, we're allowed to share. It was shared. They gave me a list, and it was shared with like 20 different agencies within the state of Iowa and the on the federal level as well. It goes to like NTSB and the Iowa Board of EMS or whatever the heck it was called, just because they want to review it and see if it has any educational value for people later on. And it's just like, you've completely lost all faith in this person privacy because you want to take what educational value there is when there's plenty of other ways to get educational value out of EMS.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is interesting, this new world we're in where you'd think that all the data that you're putting in the system or doctors and stuff are entering in somehow gets correlated so we can identify pandemics or outbreaks or a surge in cases, or even use this data to analyze to try to figure out cures, right? I want that world where we can somehow put all this together to find trends and discoveries and new science, new medicines, right? But that also means that we're losing our privacy at the same time. And this is what tears me to shreds. I cannot figure out which world is more important. The one that has the technological advancements that gives all this stuff, or the one that keeps us private. It's a tricky one to walk down.
And I'm going to play devil's advocate on that privacy side because, Jack, you talked a little bit about that information being shared with federal governments and law enforcement entities. In the experiences that I have, some of that data is important and is helpful during investigations, doing a behavioral threat assessment. How likely is this person to act on their impulses and propensity for violence in a workplace setting? That's kind of what I'm working with our department now doing. And, I'm well aware you're familiar with Michael Basil. I think it was Secret Cells you had put out his book, Extreme Privacy, which is great for people if they want to dig down in their own privacy. But he also does OSINT techniques, open source intelligence, which is what we utilize to see what we can find out about people. And just that information is helpful in developing that behavioral threat analysis and say, Jake's upset about something going on in his life and he is no longer with our company. Does he have ill will? Does he plan on becoming violent? That kind of thing. Do you think that's still helpful for, both private organizations and governments? Or do you think that's still towing that line of maybe they don't need to know anything?
Yeah, this is a tricky one for me. There's this concept called thought crime, right? Where you're just thinking of committing a crime and somebody's going to come arrest you for it. And yeah, I mean, that's very much happening all over the place. You have people who are, buying gunpowder or some sort of bomb making material, and they have like this, they're saying what they're going to do or something like that, and they get arrested, and they haven't done anything yet. They actually haven't done anything. They're just talking about it or thinking about it. And it's just enough to say, yep, that's something we're going to stop. And I'm glad that we can stop these sort of attacks before they happen. But it is a thought crime at some point that they were just thinking about doing it. They weren't actually doing it. Now, maybe they expressed the intent to do it. And so then when it comes down, that's what it comes down to as well, is this intent. I think I talk about this quite a bit on my show. The technology is neutral, but the person who's making it, what's their intent to do with it, right? So if you have a virus, was this virus for schools to practice remediating viruses? Okay, well, cool. Yeah, that's not going to actually harm this computer. It's fine. The intent is cool. We can just practice, getting a virus, dissecting a virus, studying a virus, and getting it off the computer. But is the virus there to take over the world and to cause financial harm and ruin? Okay, well, it could be the same virus. It's just it has a different intent. Or let's take it a step different, right? We've got phones out there. I use a privacy phone. It's to protect my privacy. But criminals like privacy phones too. And so there are some phones that are specifically made for criminals to protect their privacy. And it's like, well, why don't you just make a privacy phone not for criminals and then tell criminals not to use it, and we don't want anything to do with criminals, and then you'll be fine. But if you actually do say, no, we want to work with the criminals to make sure that they can use our phone to commit crimes, and that person's going to be arrested and that phone company's going to be shut down. Clearly, Apple has criminals using their phones, right? And they have a lot of encryption and privacy stuff going on in there, but it's not being shut down because that's not their intent. Their intent isn't to help criminals commit crimes, and that's why they put encryption in there. Their intent is to help privacy, be a thing in the world. And so I really fall back on this intent as like the most important thing about so many reasons why people go to jail or get arrested or not, is did they have that intent? And finding that intent is very difficult sometimes because you can easily sidestep it and say, no, I bought this gunpowder because I found a formula that I'm going to use for my garden, and it's a good nutrient rich soil or something, right? Like you could have a totally different reason for it. And I don't know. It's just really wild to come down to that line. What was your intent? And the same exact product, the same exact person, the same exact actions everyone takes has totally different outcomes based on what their intent is.
Absolutely. And like you said, cell phones, for example, Secret Cell's personal favorite episode, by the way, it really delves down to that concept, because Phantom Secure was a phone company much like Apple, but their specialty was privacy phones. And, Apple and Phantom Secure, their big deal was, we just want to make money. But the intent for Phantom Secure eventually skewed towards the criminal underworld as opposed to Joe Schmo down the road, right?
Yeah. It's wild. Just think that. And I think it comes down to cybercrime too, right? If you're poking at a hospital and you find some exploit there, and then you can get into it, and you report it to the hospital and you say, hey, by the way, you should fix this. I found a problem, and I think it could be a big problem for you, so you should fix it. Well, I don't think you're going to be arrested for that. I don't think that you're going to go to jail or prison for that. The hospital might get mad at you and say, oh, you're in trouble for hacking into our stuff. And I think they'd be wrong for getting mad at this person. But if somebody breaks in and is looking around for patient data and gets caught just not even like taking patient data, just looking around for it, but their intent was to take it or ransomware at the hospital or something like that, then yes, they may go to prison. And it's the same exact actions, the same step. It's just the intent was different.
It's absolutely crazy that you just brought up that scenario. I work at the hospital. I'm the public safety supervisor, and I like to mess around every once in a while and see what I can get away with and see what I can do with computers, internet, my hospital's network. So I'm sitting at home and I'm logged into my VPN, and I don't know, I think it was like a Japanese whatever. I was able to access my hospital's our employee website that only employees can get on through my VPN without any authentication or anything. And then I was able to log into my email without any authentication or anything. So I reported the issue to RIT, and they literally just told me that it's nothing that they can fix. They were actually really very upset with me. I felt like I was going to get in trouble. Like I emailed my director, and I'm like, hey man, I was just trying to do the right thing. They're being all weird. But it blew my mind that they were even upset with me. But yeah, it boiled down to that they just said it's an issue that they can't really resolve because my IP is catching authentication. So it's like a my end thing. And I just thought, are you guys insane? So yeah, it's funny you brought that up.
It's real tricky to navigate these things. I don't have an easy solution for a lot of these stories or a lot of these scenarios.
Jack, I kind of want to go and pivot towards your podcast, Darknet Diaries. It's become a valuable education resource for those that are interested in cybersecurity and want to become cybersecurity professionals. I know when I started in IT, I was turned over to your podcast and said, hey, check this out. It's really cool. And if you have any interest in security, just listen to some of the stories. And I obviously thought it was really cool. Jake has gotten in some interest, and again, I word of mouth said, hey, check out Darknet Diaries. It's really cool. And there's just some really amazing things on there. But what strategies do you use to ensure that your content is educational while also being entertaining for those that might not be cybersecurity professionals?
Yeah, I think, coming from a tech background, I was really into podcasts for a while, and I was listening to them, and I was like glued to stupid stories, like a story about a suitcase or a feather. Like, I have no interest in suitcases. Why am I like stuck in my car here at the place I need to be, but not wanting to leave because I want to hear the rest of the story about a suitcase? And so I was like, what is making me like stick to these stories? So this is one of the things that I studied quite a bit when making my podcast is what are the secrets to their storytelling, right? So I was reading up on This American Life and Radiolab and 99% Invisible and learning everything that these people did to make people hooked on just stupid stories. I mean, they do a good job picking good stories, but the thing is that it was a learning process, and I had to learn storytelling. So there's this craft in it to get you interested, to hook you, to play around with the chemicals in your brain, right? There's oxytocin and dopamine that I'm trying to trigger as I'm telling you stories. And these things have powerful effects on us. They make us feel good. They make us get extra into the story, where we have this feeling of being on a cliffhanger that gives us, emotions. So I'm playing with all these things. I'm learning how this works. I'm pulling on these strings as part of the whole storytelling process. I do think that primarily I am a teacher. I feel like that's where I feel the best. That's where I feel the most amount of value is when somebody learns something or they're inspired. I think inspiration is probably bigger, but it still feels like a teacher to me. So I want to lead with that foot, but I don't want to just be straight up like a teacher. I want to kind of hide that broccoli in the really good tasting soup or whatever, right? So that's where the storytelling comes in. It gives you that boat to ride on to get to the place that I want you to be. And yeah, that's there's a lot to storytelling. So I could go on and on about that for a while, but that's kind of my strategy there, is to be that teacher, but also be entertaining at the same time.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing how you pull your stories together. It sounds so amazing, and you're just like, I feel like I'm always on the edge of my seat, like what's coming next, It's just it's really awesome to listen to. You're very good at what you do.
Thank you. I think another big thing is that I'm just a real curious cat. And so whenever I'm going through a story and something, I don't understand something, they said a tool that I don't know, or a technique, or a city. I mean, even a city, you say, oh, I come from this city. I am going to Google that city. I'm going to look at maps of that city, beaches or rivers, like what's going on in the town you grew up in, so I can understand like your aspect of it. Like I'm just constantly curious about every aspect of that story, so I can get as deep and as full of an understanding as I can. And those sometimes take me to places that get put into the story. Like, what do kids in that town do for fun? Right? And then, did you grow up doing this? Yeah. Oh, wow. What was that like? And stuff like that. Right. And so it just brings me into like their world in a way that I think that the person who comes on my show appreciates too, is like, wow, you like, I'm doing an episode now about dubstep, right? There's a hack that went on in the dubstep scene. And so I'm going to learn all that I can about dubstep, and I don't listen to dubstep. So it's like all new music to me, but I really have to like learn all of it to just like be able to understand this scene in the best way. And that brings so much extra color and flavor into every story to take you into a world that you didn't know anything about. And now you're experiencing it in a very deep and wonderful way.
So on that note, Jack, are you going to be putting dubstep in your daily music rotation now, or? Yeah,
it is in my daily rotation now, because I want to get it. And I don't like dubstep. So it's just like, why is this in my rotation? But then I'm like, so I'm hoping it stays in long enough for me to like learn to appreciate it and want to hear it just for fun and not just for work.
Oh, that's absolutely
awesome.
Hilarious.
I think a lot of times people correlate hacking or maybe internet crimes like stealing cryptocurrency or whatever. I think a lot of people correlate those to be almost like victimless crimes. And so I just wanted to point out the connection between the internet and life safety from what perspective I have. In the EMS and fire world, specifically the fire world, our pumps on our trucks are Wi-Fi capable now, and they can be ran off of a tablet. So, we talked about things that should be that are on the internet that shouldn't be on the internet. And it concerns me, that stuff like that could be on the internet because, we could be in a burning building and somebody could be looking at, this tablet that controls the pump on our truck, and that's how we get water. And all of a sudden, they take control of it or whatever, just shut our water off while we're in a burning building or something. And I guess what I'm just trying to get at is a lot of people I think from a simple mindset, they think that computer crimes can be victimless crimes. And that's very much not the case.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Even the case of like, credit card breaches where, I think it was Home Depot or Target that was breached. And so everyone was like, the credit card companies are like, let's replace everyone's credit cards because all these, users' credit cards were in a breach. And so there were people that were getting their credit cards canceled, and like these were important credit cards to some people. They couldn't operate their business for a few days or be able to support their family for a few days. And all these kind of like problems showed up. And it feels like, no, when I'm stealing credit cards, it's the credit card company that's the one who's going to be the victim here. And I don't have to worry about, hurting people, stealing money from people and stuff. But it really does have quite an impact on a lot more people than you realize. And it's not just some big nameless corporation or faceless corporation. There's a lot else going on there.
Going back to when you're doing research for your stories and you're getting immersed in things like dubstep, or you're trying to get into the mind of that cyber criminal, do you find it easier to not understand and empathize with kind of their motivations on that perspective? So
yeah, I think I'm glad you asked this question, because I think that's the whole point of it. It's to understand them. And when we hear people doing like just stupid or awful crimes, your first knee-jerk reaction is what an idiot, what a jerk, all this stuff. But when you go back and you understand their childhood and you see the trauma they've gone through, or just the time and the place that they were at on the internet had such an impact and effect on them, or what was going on in the news at the time, or all these factors that came in. Maybe they had some sort of mental issues, right? And when you put all those into place, now you don't feel like, oh, they're such an idiot. Now you feel like, of course they did that. I would have done that same thing if I was in their position. And that puts you in such a weird position now when you're listening to the story. Like, oh man, I would be doing that too. But then when they get arrested and they go to prison or whatever, you feel like so happy that it wasn't you. Like you could just live vicariously through this person, and then you could take a step back and actually enjoy your night or whatever, and be like, well, I'm glad I didn't get arrested today. And there's this, I really like bringing you into the story in that way of, wouldn't you do this too? Doesn't this make sense for you to want to hack your principal because the principal did something so awful to you or something? So I do that just to, and I think the guest really appreciates that too, of like, you get someone from the New York Times or some other, just mainstream journalist, doesn't understand the hacking culture, doesn't understand this person, just wants that like a headline. I hacked it because I thought it was cool. And that's it. Now that's it. Move on. Next story. Now we know why that person hacked Twitter or whatever. And I think, no, that's not enough. I want to know everything about this person. I want to understand why, who your friends were at the time, where you learned this and all this stuff, so that I get a much richer sense of why. And then that gets me such a complex understanding of the world. It's nuanced. It's not black and white. It's not full of headlines. It's quite complex. And that is the world I'm trying to decipher, is this complexity of it, not simply, dumb it down to one line.
I can appreciate that, and I'm sure every single listener can appreciate that as well, especially because, as you said, they're super complex, and computers can be complex, but the humans behind the computers are the most complex thing in the story. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I am kind of right there with you. And with that, have you found any stories, or is there anything that you wanted to cover, but you're like, that's too challenging, or maybe it's too sensitive and it's not something that you want to tackle as a story? Have there been any stories like that? And kind of how do you decide what stories you are going to tell?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quite a few. There's quite a few things that I don't want to amplify in the world. I'd rather everyone just ignore that. That's a black eye of the human race or something. Let's just ignore that. And I think that's the best option for all of us. Is if we just not act like it doesn't exist, but just like give it zero oxygen, and so it just dies immediately. Like that is what I do. So there's just stories that I just do not want to amplify in any way, shape, or form, because it's awful to me. And then there are stories that I can't verify, right? So there's one story that's just so wild that a person did a lot of really evil things, and I cannot find any I can't research it. There's just no way. And so it's really difficult. It's like probably the best story I've ever had been told to me, but it's one that I just can't air because there's no way to fact check it. So I get stuck on that sort of thing. I'm really big on making sure that there's as much truth in the story as possible, and we stuck to all the facts in there. Because to me, that's the magic, is when truth is stranger than fiction, and you're just like, what? There's no way this is true. And then I'm like pulling out court records at the end of it, like, oh yeah, this is where I learned all this from, because the FBI agent testified that they saw him do it or something. Like, what are you serious? That really happened. So that's my favorite part, is when I can prove that all this actually happened.
What is the most truth is stranger than fiction moment you've come across so far?
I think the Xbox Underground story was one of my favorite episodes. I think it's episode 45 or 46. There's two of them actually. And these ones, these kids just basically hacked into all the video game companies, all the top ones, like the top 20 or 50 or something. It was just ridiculous how many they hacked into, all so that they could play unreleased video games, like the beta versions of these games. It wasn't for any other reason. And the amount of chaos they caused and craziness, it just, every chapter just gets crazier and crazier. And you're just like, no way can this get any crazier. And it just keeps going and going. I don't want to give away too much, but that one is very special to me. Of like, when I heard that story, I was like, this one I need to do right. I'm not rushing this one. I think I spent like maybe 6 months on that one just to make sure every step of it was done as best I possibly can. And I'm very proud of it, because I took it very seriously and very slow, because it is just one of those stories that's like, no way. And people just don't believe it. But yeah, I've got receipts on all of it.
It's crazy and amazing, and does so much for the story that you put in 6 months of work. That's just blows my mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard by design as well, because what I'm trying to do is get those stories that never been told before from those people that have never wanted to tell their story, right? So I'm approaching these kind of people. Hey, I know you work for this government agency, and I know you've done this thing. Don't ask me how I know, but I know. Can you tell it? No, I will never be able to tell that story. And I don't know who told you that, because I'm not even going to admit to any of that, right? And so that's the story as I'm seeking. That's the stuff I'm trying to get into, is this new world that you never thought you would ever hear a story from. And I want to pull it out and show it to you. And I'm cool about it. It's not like I'm trying to like twist people's arms or, threaten to like, well, tell me or else I'm going to expose you or something. I'll come back next year and I'll see if you're ready to tell, right? So year after year after year, I'm talking with people like, and they're starting to, come around like, wow, you're actually pretty cool about it. You're not trying to force me. I've listened to some of your episodes now. You do actually a good job at explaining the topic. I'll think about it, right? And so 2, 3, 4 years go by sometimes before somebody does finally say yes. Okay, I think it's time. And then that's the best stuff, is when it's like, okay, I've been chasing this story for 3 years, and now we can finally talk about it. I mean, there's stuff where I have to wait for people to come out of prison to tell stories, and I'm writing to them in prison and just waiting for years to go by. And when they get out, we've got that connection and we can get going. So yeah, sometimes things just take a long time, and I don't mind, because I feel like I'm a slow news junkie. So I'm like, hey, if it takes you 9 years to get out of prison, I'll still be here. And I think we should do the story even if I'm not making a podcast by then, right? I think it will still be pretty good. So yeah, it's really interesting to just put all these connections in play and just let them simmer over time.
So my last question for you is, what do you think one of the biggest risks out there today is?
Cybersecurity risks. Let's see. From public safety persona, I think it does come down to our digital privacy once again. And I think I've yapped on about this for long enough, but it is one of those things that we don't even have privacy in our own homes, right? We've got these cameras on, these microphones on, our watches are tracking our heart rate, our TVs are watching everything that we do. We've got that smart connected toaster and everything now. And it's like, there's nothing left for us to be private with. And it's a weird world to just have it welcomed into our homes in this way. And so, I do feel like this is going to betray us. This is going to wreck us in some way. And again, like I said, I'm such a lover of technology that I feel hurt like badly by this. And I don't want to be this person that feels like a doomer or somebody who's anti-technology, because I love technology and I want a front row seat to all this stuff. And I want to be the first to buy the connected toaster because it's cool and I love it. But it's just so painful to see how these companies just aren't looking after our safety in this way and doing some some pretty bad things. So some things that are good are like, since I know you guys are in the medical stuff, we see the hacking conference, DEF CON, has a medical hacking village, and they invite medical device makers over to it and say, hey, bring your device to our hacking conference. We want to hack it up as best we can, and we want to see if it's secure. And some of these companies are like, heck yeah, let's go. And so they come and they bring, insulin pumps or, some other life-saving device or life-sustaining device maybe, that like, yeah, if somebody hacked this, it would be a pretty big deal. Let's see what you got. And hackers will work on it all weekend and sometimes find vulnerabilities and bugs and then give that to the makers. And the makers are like, thank you, we're going to make this better. And I love that sort of connection between the hackers and the manufacturers of the world of like, hey, this is the immune system of our whole internet is the hackers. They're going to find the vulnerabilities and the exploits, and then it's up to us to fix it. So that I think is good steps in the right direction, is work with the hackers to get your stuff more secure, again, make us all more secure.
Yeah, and it just seems like they're so afraid to do that, and I understand why, but at the same time, it's like, this is how you figure these issues out.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it comes down to resources. You buy the cheaper insulin pump, which now that company hasn't put security as a priority. They couldn't. They're just like, look, we're going as cheap as we can. You want that? That's going to cost extra or something. And so you got to watch out. Like, when you're a hospital buying equipment, what is it the cheapest equipment we're getting? Is it the most secure equipment we're getting? Like these things aren't even like factors. A lot of times it's, reputation. Is it a reliable equipment? Is it going to work to save a life? And it's interesting to try to figure out what is the reason that you're going to buy this equipment for your team.
I want to do a callback to social engineering, episode 107, another personal favorite of mine. I can't say her name. I will butcher it.
Aleth?
Yes, Aleth. And you talked earlier about social engineering and its place when you're doing a pen test or that CIA agent is trying to, or that CIA case officer is trying to get those resources from the foreign entity. What do you think in the public safety world, whether you're a security guard walking around the hospital preventing people from getting anywhere, or you're the beat cop in a big city, you notice something just a little weird with someone and, maybe they're getting RFID information from a Proxmark and you see that. How or what do you recommend for people to learn to kind of get around that social engineering?
I think we should verify people more often, right? So you got people trying to, follow you through a door. You don't know them. Should they come through the door? The door is a locked door. You had to badge in to get through, right? So shut the door behind them or behind you and say, sorry, but you need to badge in to get through, and just leave it at that. And I think that's good. Or somebody calls on the phone and says, oh, I work with IT. Can you help me reset my password or something? Give them an extra challenge. Like say, hey, what's your phone? You're an employee here. Let me see if I could just call you back on your listed phone number. And, do something like that so that you don't get tricked into, giving people something that it was a bad actor trying to get. So yeah, just doing that extra challenge, trying to be aware, could this possibly be someone tricking me right now? And if so, how can I challenge them to get to the truth of it? And I know we want to be trusting and we want to be helpful. If you see a pregnant woman coming through, you're like, oh, I'll hold the door for you. No problem, ma'am. That might be a fake belly suit. You never know, right? So it's tricky to know like what to challenge and what not. I struggle with this all the time. I hold doors open for people that I look up and down and I say, could this person be a spy? I think they're safe. I'll open the door for them. And it's really tricky.
Can't remember if it's talked about in that episode, but a mentor of mine that now works for an alphabet agency, his favorite story to tell was having a recording of a baby in the background of a phone call.
Mm-hmm.
And that just blew me away. I'm like, if I'm a call associate and I'm taking that call, I would probably not want a baby screaming in my ear either. I can get why people do that.
Yeah. There's a lot of psychological tricks you can do to get people just to help you out in a way that would kind of take down their warnings, their red flags. They're just not visible anymore because they see how stressed out you are or something like that. Yeah. It's there's a lot of tricks you can do.
What do you recommend, or what can the everyday American do to secure their home network better than probably what they are now?
Yeah, I think that just kind of some standard suggestions are to use a different password on every website, and you use a long, complex one that you're not going to remember, right? And so since you can't remember it, I recommend using a password manager. And this is kind of like a vault that stores all your passwords in it in a secure way. And then you don't have to think about, oh, what's the password here? The manager remembered it for you, and you don't even know the password, honestly. So that's good. I think keeping your software up to date is good because the more out of date it goes, the more vulnerable it gets to attacks. So companies are always updating their stuff with security fixes, and it's probably good to just jump on the latest update for all the software on your phone or on your computer or your operating system. Anything that can be updated, it's recommended to update. Running an antivirus every now and then is probably good just to kind of check things out and look for stuff. And I think those are just 3 good takeaways.
And then, Jack, 2 final questions from the entire podcast. Do you have any questions for us, be it in that law enforcement, EMS, fire, just any questions?
How come I cannot remember the steps for CPR when I can still remember the jingle for that commercial that I watched when I was a kid?
That's hilarious.
They've actually got a new song now. I can't remember what it is, but there's a new song they got to go with that.
Is it Staying Alive?
Yeah, they have Staying Alive, but now they've got a new one. They wanted to modernize it for the new era of kids, I guess, or adults. So
I think that's probably helpful to put a song to it, because you remember songs more than you remember ABC. Airway, breathing. I don't even understand.
Airway, breathing, circulation. That's all you got to remember. All you got to remember is
That's funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the last question, Jack, are there any upcoming collaborations, special projects, episodes? Are you going to compile some of your favorite stories into a book that you'd care to share with us, our listeners, and potentially other listeners from your show?
I have been working on a book. I think there's a story that is, I've kind of got access to a whole bunch of people and understanding and knowledge and visibility, just visibility into certain circles, that there's a story that I think is probably worth a whole book. And so I think I've interviewed like 7 people now, and I probably just need to do a few more, and I'm probably ready to start writing it. But books are very difficult to create, and I just have not put a lot of priority into it. And especially when I'm trying to get the podcast going, it's difficult to find time in between episodes to go back and work on a book. So yeah, I think that would be a fun one to get out there. I think people would really like that.
So coming soon, trademark, untitled Jack Rhysider, cyber thriller.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning into the Beyond the Barrier. Thank you, Jack, for coming onto the show and enlightening us with everything you have going on and the stories that you're able to tell.
This was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
All that kind of fun stuff. Our training tip today is from isc2.org. They are currently doing their 1 million certified cybersecurity specialists. That training is free. They have free online roadmap courses as well as an exam to help jumpstart your cybersecurity career. Jack, do you have any training tips?
I like getting hands-on lab stuff, as that's how I learn the most, right? And so it's easy to kind of find a website now to just play around with some of these commands, or get a Raspberry Pi and play around doing things just live on any machine, or even running like virtual machines on your computer. That these are all good like hands-on spaces that you can learn on. And I learn so much faster when I'm actually typing things out and trying it for myself.
Again, Jack, we appreciate you coming on. Good luck out there. We will be excited to read about and listen to the untitled Jack Rhysider stories. Thanks again.
Sure. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
All right, everybody, that's all we got for you guys this episode. If you want any more from us, make sure you check out our other podcast, and we will catch you guys on the next episode.
And that's a wrap for another episode of Beyond the Barrier. We hope you enjoyed diving deep into the world of public safety, fire, law enforcement, EMS, and security with us. Your trusty hosts, Jake, Joe, and Corwin. If you liked what you heard, make sure to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to follow us on social media for even more exclusive content and behind-the-scenes look at our guests and topics. But for now, it's time to put down the walkie-talkies and hang up the handcuffs. We'll catch you next time on Beyond the Barrier, where we'll continue to break down barriers and explore the exciting world of first responders and security professionals. Stay safe out there.